Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. Today, we're trying something a little audacious. We're not just looking at history or theology in the abstract. We're attempting a kind of forensic analysis. We're taking this massive stack of ancient texts, scripture, and trying to build a psychological profile of the divine. We're trying to move beyond that huge cultural debate of does God exist to a much more specific question, this textual one. If this God is real, what's his actual personality? Because the source material we have today, it presents this huge contradiction. You have a being of absolute cosmic power who then describes himself as a gardener or a heartbroken parent or even a lover who sings over his people. It's a fascinating way to cut through all the noise. Hey, before we really get into this, I have a small request. If you like my channel, please subscribe and press the like button. It really does help us keep making this kind of content for you. Okay, so let's unpack this. We have this compilation of text chapters from John, Isaiah, Psalms, Romans, Hosea, all under this theme of rest in God's love. But we're not just reading them, right? We're trying to figure out the character traits they reveal. Where do you even start with a profile like this?
Well, it's a fascinating challenge because you're right, the imagery is just incredibly diverse. Usually when we approach these texts, we come with so much baggage, cultural, philosophical baggage. We think of the unmoved mover or, some caricature. But if we want to get to the core personality in these specific sources, we actually have to start with a metaphor about botany.
Botany, okay. I did not see that coming.
So specifically, John chapter 15, the text opens with this very specific claim. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener.
A gardener, not a CEO, not some distant king, not a five-star general, but someone with, dirt under their fingernails.
Exactly. And that power dynamic is vital to the whole profile. In our world, and honestly in the ancient world too, the human is usually defined as a servant or an employee. Your value comes from what you produce.
You earn your keep. If you don't produce, you're out.
Right. It's transactional. I work, I get paid. I build something, I get status. That's the hustle.
But this text defines the human not as a worker, but as a branch.
Which implies a biological connection. You can't just hire a branch, right?
It's total dependence. I mean, think about it. A branch doesn't just stand there and grunt and strain, trying to force a grape to pop out by sheer willpower.
No, it can't. The source text is explicit. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. The argument here is that the fruit, which, usually implies character, patience, love, good deeds, it's a byproduct of connection. It's not a result of just grinding harder.
That is so counterintuitive to how we live. We feel like if we're not straining, we're not achieving. So the personality of this God isn't demanding production like some factory foreman.
Oh, he is demanding production. He wants fruit. But he's arguing that the method of production is connection. The main command isn't try harder. It's remain in me.
Okay, but this is where I get stuck. The text also talks about pruning. And if I'm being honest, that sounds painful. If I'm a branch and the gardener starts cutting pieces off of me, that feels like punishment.
It does. It feels like you did something wrong. And this is what we could call the pruning paradox, and it's where the psychological profile gets really complex. The text distinguishes between two actions the gardener takes. It says he cuts off every branch that bears no fruit, so that's removal. But then it says every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes.
So even if you're doing a good job, you still get cut.
Yes, but the intent is completely different. To a branch, being pruned probably feels exactly the same as being cut off. You're losing leaves, losing volume, it looks like destruction. But the text argues it's an intentional curation. The gardener cuts away the dead wood or the superfluous growth, the sucker shoots that just steal energy so that it will be even more fruitful.
So it completely reframes the experience of suffering or loss. In this profile, hardship isn't necessarily an accident. And it's not necessarily a punishment.
Right. It could be the gardener maximizing the potential of the branch. It changes the question from why is this awful thing happening to me to what is being cleared away here to make room for new growth. It suggests a God who is intimately involved, not just watching from a distance.
That's a tough shift to make when you're in the middle of it, though. But I want to pivot to something that, it genuinely shocked me in these texts. Usually when we think of a God concept, especially in those big atheistic or skeptical debates, we think of that watchmaker God.
Yeah.
The entity that winds up the universe and just steps back. Stoic, unemotional.
Right, the impassive deity. That's the classic Greek philosophical view. A God who can't suffer, who can't be moved by emotion.
But these texts, specifically Hosea chapter 11 and Zephaniah 3, they completely shatter that image. They present a God who is incredibly, almost uncomfortably emotional.
Hosea 11 is probably the most startling piece of evidence for this divine emotion. You have to remember, in the ancient Near East, gods were terrifying. They were distant figures you had to bribe with sacrifices so they wouldn't, kill your crops. But Hosea uses the imagery of a parent with a toddler.
A toddler.
Yes. It says, "It was I who taught Ephraim to walk, taking them by the arms." It describes lifting them up to his cheek and bending down to feed them. It's so domestic, so intimate. It's a God who is on the floor playing with his kids.
It sounds vulnerable. And that is not a word you usually pair with omnipotent.
Precisely. And the text uses that vulnerability to set up a tragedy. It describes this people, this child, just turning away, rejecting the parent. And then, and this is so rare in ancient literature, we get a window into the internal monologue of God. We see a deity literally debating with himself.
This is the part that just floored me. He asks, "How can I give you up, Ephraim? How can I hand you over?"
It's a total internal conflict. Justice is saying, let them go, but love is saying, hold on.
And it says, "My heart is changed within me. All my compassion is aroused." I mean, that is not a stoic God. That is a God who is vulnerable to heartbreak.
It suggests that to love is to open yourself up to suffering. So if the text claims God loves, it has to also claim that God suffers when that love is rejected. It presents a God who is deeply personally affected by what we do. He isn't just sitting on a cloud looking at a spreadsheet of sins. He is feeling the rejection.
And then you have Zephaniah 3, which swings to the total opposite end of the emotional spectrum. This one is wild to me. It says, "God rejoices over you with singing." Now, I could picture a choir singing to God. That's standard religious imagery. Humans sing to the divine, but God's singing over a human. That feels like a total reversal of roles.
It suggests a level of delight that we just don't usually associate with the divine. The text says, "He will take great delight in you." It's the difference between, say, a boss who is satisfied with your quarterly report and a father who is overjoyed just because his kid walked into the room.
It's enthusiasm.
It is, and it's a crucial part of this psychological profile. This being isn't just tolerant of humanity. He's described as genuinely enthusiastic about it.
But we do need to be careful with the word love here.
Yeah.
Because in our culture, love is, well, it's a very fluffy word. It's a hashtag, means I like pizza, or I love my dog, or I love that new TV show. But the source material, specifically 1 Corinthians 13 and 1 John 4, seems to be much more rigorous.
It is, yeah. 1 Corinthians 13 is often read at weddings, which is nice, but it's actually a behavioral blueprint. It defines love by what it isn't. It's not proud, it's not self-seeking, it keeps no record of wrongs. But 1 John 4 goes deeper. It gives us the psychological mechanism of this love, and it makes a really bold claim. Perfect love drives out fear.
Fear has to do with punishment. That's the line that stuck with me. Because, let's be honest, most religion and a lot of skepticism about religion is built on fear. Fear of hell, fear of karma, fear of the gods smiting you.
Exactly. The text argues that fear and love are just incompatible in this relationship. If you're afraid of someone, afraid they'll hurt you, afraid they'll condemn you, then you aren't experiencing love in its perfect form. The profile of God here is someone who wants to eliminate the fear of punishment entirely.
Which brings us to the legal side of things. Because if this God is holy, and humans are, well, humans, we mess up, we hurt people, we lie, then legally, there should be a problem. There should be punishment. You can't just love away a crime.
You're absolutely right. A just judge can't just say, "Oh, I love you, so the murder you committed didn't happen." Justice requires a verdict. This is what leads us to the arguments in Romans, specifically chapters 5 and 8. This is where the profile shifts from parent to judge.
But it describes a really strange court case. Romans 5 talks about an unfair exchange.
It's a judicial concept called justification. Romans 5 admits the reality. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person. We might die for a good friend, a family member, but the text says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us.
That's the unfair part. It's not a transaction where you get what you pay for. It's a transaction where the ungodly, the criminals, get the status of the righteous.
And this leads to the verdict in Romans 8. There is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. The text uses heavy legal language here. Condemnation is a final sentence. It's the death penalty. Justification is a declaration of innocence.
Wait, explain that. How can you declare someone innocent if they actually did the crime?
And that is the crux of the whole argument in these texts. It's based on substitution. The text argues that the penalty was fully paid by the substitute, Christ. So the law is satisfied, but the defendant goes free. It's why the text calls it grace. It's a legal standing you didn't earn.
There's this interesting pattern the text uses to explain it, comparing Adam to Christ, the one-man pattern.
Right, it's a logic of containment almost, or infection. Think of it like a biological containment breach. The text argues that one man, Adam, introduced a virus, sin, and death that infected the entire human race. We all have it, it's hereditary.
Okay, so we're all born with the virus.
Exactly. But then it argues that the gift brought by the second man, Jesus, is an antidote that is way more powerful than the virus. It says grace increased all the more. It's an argument of overwhelming abundance. The solution is far greater than the problem ever was.
So if we're building this profile, we have a gardener who wants connection, a parent who is emotionally vulnerable, a lover who drives out fear, and a judge who declares the guilty innocent at his own expense. But I want to push back a bit here, because this all sounds great in theory, but life is actually really, really hard. The text doesn't deny that, does it? It doesn't promise a rose garden.
Not at all. In fact, if you look at Isaiah 43, it's incredibly realistic. It doesn't say, if you pass through the waters. It says, when, and when you walk through the fire.
That is a crucial distinction. The profile of this God isn't a genie who grants a trouble-free life.
No, the promise isn't the absence of trouble. The promise is presence. I will be with you. The text claims that in the fire, you're not alone. And the imagery in Psalm 91 reinforces this protective aspect. But again, it's amidst danger. It talks about the fowler snare and deadly pestilence.
That sounds like a horror movie. A fowler's snare is a trap for birds.
It is. It's a world full of traps. But then the text uses that image of feathers and wings. He will cover you with his feathers. It's back to that bird-like parental protection.
It reminds me of those nature documentaries, where the mother bird covers the chicks in a storm, she takes the rain, they stay dry.
That's the image. And in Isaiah 43, the language gets very intense about value. The deity says, I give Egypt for your ransom. He talks about trading entire nations for the life of one individual because they are precious and honored in his sight.
It reinforces that idea of the individual being the object of this intense affection and value, even while the waters and rivers are rising all around them. But here's the ultimate human insecurity. We always ask, what if I mess it up? Or what if the world gets too crazy? What if I lose my faith? The text in Romans 8 seems to anticipate that exact anxiety.
This is really the climax of the argument in the source material. Paul, the writer of Romans, he acts like a lawyer giving his closing statement. He asks, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? And then he goes on this exhaustive, almost frantic list.
Let's run through that list, because he's trying to cover every possible base. It starts with physical things: trouble, hardship, persecution, famine, nakedness, danger, sword.
Basically, the worst things that can happen to a human body: war, starvation, torture. The text says none of those things indicate a separation from God's love.
But then the list gets metaphysical. It mentions angels and demons.
That's interesting, right? Spiritual powers. He's saying that even if there are cosmic forces aligned against you, they cannot sever this bond.
Then he covers time, neither the present nor the future.
This hits that anxiety of, what if I do something tomorrow that ruins this? The text argues the bond is time-proof. You can't do something today, and nothing can happen tomorrow that breaks this attachment.
And just in case he missed anything, he adds, nor anything else in all creation.
It's a logical trap, a complete catch-all. If you are a created thing, or if your problem is a created thing, it falls under anything else in all creation. The verdict is that nothing will be able to separate us from the love of God.
It connects right back to that refrain in Psalm 136. We heard it over and over in the readings. His love endures forever. It listed creation, wars, being lost in the desert, rescue. And after every single event, the text repeats that chorus.
It's relentless. That's the word that comes to mind when I look at this profile. It is a relentless pursuit. Whether the human is a sinner, a branch, or a child, the divine character is constant. It does not fluctuate based on the human's performance.
So let's bring this all together. We started by trying to build a psychological profile. And based on these sources, we don't see a distant, angry tyrant. We see a gardener obsessed with growth, willing to prune, but refusing to ever cut off the connection. We see a parent who teaches us to walk and is heartbroken when we stumble away. We see a protector who doesn't stop the fire, but promises to walk into it with us.
And fundamentally, we see a definition of love that is self-sacrificial, a God who defines himself not by the power he holds, but by the love he gives away.
It is a heavy concept to wrap your mind around. It contradicts so much of how we view power in our world. In our world, power creates distance. The CEO is on the top floor, you can't reach him. In this text, power creates proximity.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it raises a really provocative thought for you, the listener. The text presents this paradox that challenges both religious legalism, which says you have to earn it, and skeptical distance, which says God doesn't care. It describes a master who calls his servants friends and a God who dies for his enemies. If that narrative is true, even just partially, it changes the fundamental question. It's no longer just an intellectual debate about, do I believe in God? The text forces you to ask, do I want to be known by a God like this?
That is the question. Do I want to be known by a God like this? We're going to leave you with that to chew on. Thank you for listening to this deep dive into the ancient texts.
It was a pleasure to explore it.
If you enjoyed this analysis, remember to check out the full source material for yourself. Until next time, keep thinking deeper.